Okay, so now we can start. Good evening, Nita ma'am. Good evening, Ruchi ma'am. Good evening, Nitin Kataria ji. Good evening, Nishant Kumar ji. And good evening to all participants of today's this virtual CPE program. Friends, today we are going to deliberate on a very important issues, that is the standard of internal audit benchmark for quality. So now I introduce CA Nitin Kataria ji, the chairman of Gurgaon branch of NRIC. Over to you, Kataria ji.
Thank you, Nawal sir. Thanks a lot. A very good evening to everyone, and a very good evening to our guest speakers of the day, Ruchi ma'am and Neeta ma'am. And first of all, I would like to thank IASB committee for giving us a chance to host this wonderful program. So, being the host from the Gurgaon branch, we welcome I, on behalf of whole Gurgaon committee, welcome everyone, including the speakers and the members who are watching and moderators, Nawalji. So, thanks a lot once again. Now, I would like to mention this very clearly that the IASB has been doing a wonderful job from the last year or so. It has been regularly conducting program, and in fact, they have given Gurgaon branch a few chances before also to host these wonderful programs in the past also. And now under the, as everyone know, that there are election codes, and the code of conduct is going on, and even still then they are doing these kind of programs on a regular basis. So this is a very welcome step from the ISB committee. And as always, that they have picked the wonderful topic on this standards on internal audit, a benchmark for quality. And to deliberate upon this, we have our own very senior CA professional members, Ruchi ma'am and Nita ma'am, with a tons of experience in the corporate world, and ready to share their knowledge, and ready to impart the knowledge to all the young members and all those who have joined. And it is rightly said that internal audit standards are one of the most important for an organization, as Ruchi ma'am will be deliberating upon the documentation part, and Nita ma'am will be taking the 370 and 360 in IS. So once again, without taking too much of time, now I hand over the dash to Nawal sir. And thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitin Kataria ji, to make the understand of the internal audits for all our CA fraternity members. And today is the era of internal audits. And today we have a very good learned speaker with us, CA Nita ma'am. She having 30 years of professional experience, and she has served large clientele, MNCs, Indian MNCs, Indian corporates, and she has worked in a diverse industries from manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, automobiles, power, banking, etc. as a audit partner in Deloitte Haskins and Sales DHS. She took up the challenge of accepting the role of internal audit partner and moved to risk advisory in October 2008. Her specialization is in internal audit, process review, internal control review, IFC, ICFR, SOX, readiness and testing, contract risk compliance, standard operating procedure, risk management, and quality assurance review. She qualified online proficiency self-assessment test for independent director conducted by the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs in June 2020. At present, she is engaged in the activities of ICAI. So, dear professional friends, we all will be learning the importance of the internal audit, and Nita ma'am will share all these expertise and experience what she has gained over the years. So now over to Nita ma'am.
Thank you for your kind words, Dhavalji. I hope I am audible.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everyone. All my professional colleagues on the dais and off the dais. So today's session basically is talking about internal audit. The session covers the benchmarking for quality. When you talk about benchmarking for quality, and the topic that I am covering is going to be an overview of standards on internal audit with focus on documentation. So I am sure some people would be wondering as to, whilst the session's supposed to be covering focusing on quality, why are we talking about documentation? Why is the focus on documentation in my session? So I would like to submit that unless and until the documentation is in place, you will not be able to really prove that you've done a quality work. So it becomes very important that whilst quality is definitely important, documentation is equally important, and therefore one should not ignore the documentation aspect. So today's session, I'll first take an overview of all standards on internal audit, where my focus is going to be on documentation. So can I share my screen? Do I have the right to share the screen?
Yeah, sure.
Just give me a minute. It's covering my. Okay. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, yes.
Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am, visible.
Right. So basically, as I was saying, that I'm going to be covering the overview of standards on internal audit with special focus on documentation. And this is a subject which is very close to my heart, but at the same time, it is a vast subject too. So 45 minutes, I'm not too sure in this 45 minutes how much I'm going to be able to cover, but I'll try my best to cover as much as I can in next maybe 35 to 40 minutes. So this is the list of contents. Please don't get scared. What I am proposing to do is I'll give a brief overview and a little bit of background on the regulatory front. Then we'll briefly touch upon expectations from internal auditors, which then leads us to the steps taken by our Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, where especially with regard to standards on internal audit, where, as I mentioned earlier, my focus is going to be documentation only. And finally, I'll explain the significance of documentation when I conclude. So various regulators such as SEBI, RDA, RBI, Department of Company Affairs had made internal audit mandatory either directly or indirectly at different points in time. Though these regulators made internal audit mandatory, there was not much of a guidance on the aspects of scope, methodology, qualification, roles and responsibilities of internal auditor. To give you an example, Department of Company Affairs had issued CARO 2003, which stipulated the requirement of reporting on adequacy of internal audit system by statutory auditors. However, there was no mention of internal audit under the Companies Act 1956. Finally, Companies Act 2013, via Section 138, read with Rule 13 of the Companies Accounts Rules 2014, stipulated the requirement of internal audit. However, rule also provided applicability criteria only, and not the approach and methodology that needs to be followed for internal audit. This responsibility has been cast on the audit committee and board. So audit committee or the board should, in consultation with the auditor, internal auditor, formulate the scope, functioning, periodicity, and methodology for conducting the internal audit. Let's have a quick look at CARO 2020. CARO 2003 had stipulated the requirement of reporting on adequacy of internal audit system by statutory auditor. However, this requirement, which is clause 14A of paragraph 3, was deleted in CARO 2013 and it got reintroduced in CARO 2020. CARO 2020 also had one new insertion, which is clause 14B, which states as below, whether the reports of the internal auditors for the period under audit were considered by the statutory auditor. CARO 2020 originally was effective from 1st April 2019, but it got deferred twice. And finally, it is effective for financial year 2021 and 22. So now we have reporting requirements under CARO 2020, and also Companies Act 2013 requires internal auditors mandatorily for specified class of companies. With this background, now let us look at what the expectations from internal auditors are. Again, this is a list of illustrative expectations as well as illustrative stakeholders only. As you can see, we have a long list of both stakeholders as well as the expectations. Internal auditors these days are expected to be more of a consultant than of a classic internal auditor who can create value. Earlier, internal auditor's role used to be mere preservation of value, but it's no longer that. It's now expected that internal auditor will not only preserve value, but create value. The internal auditors are, sorry?
Ma'am, can you make this presentation full screen?
It is not full screen?
Yeah, it is not full screen.
Just give me a minute. Let me see. I thought it is full screen. Is it full screen now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Sorry for this. So we were talking about expectations from internal auditors, right? So as I was saying that the internal auditor is expected to create value and not just preserve value. Internal auditors are expected to have the insight and foresight of both issues and risk, because they are expected to be an expert in risk management, support management in strategy and governance, cover not only financial aspects but operational matters also. In addition to that, internal auditors are expected to provide assurance and be a trusted advisor. So all these require deployment of tools, technology, and digitization, supported with soft skills such as leadership qualities, presentation skills, and communication skills. Having all of these expectations, an internal auditor trying to meet this expectation, in spite of all of this, in case anything goes wrong, if there is any error or if there is any fraud that occurs, every stakeholder raises questions to internal auditors as to why did they not pick it up? What were they doing? I mean, so how does an internal auditor answer these questions? How does he defend himself and prove that he was not negligent? So documentation will provide the required answers. So as I mentioned earlier, not only technical skills and quality are paramount, but documentation, I would repeat, documentation is equally important. Moving on to the steps that our institute has taken. Institute formed a committee for internal audit way back in 2004, which is now known as the Internal Audit Standards Board, which we keep calling as ISB. So ISB has issued various technical guides and guidance on internal audit, both generic and industry specific. During the period 2006 and 2013, there were 18 standards that were issued by ISB, and post 2018 and between 2018 and 2020, there are 13 new principle-based SIAs that have been issued. These are performance benchmarks as they represent best practices. In addition to this, ISB has also revised preface to the framework governing internal audits and basic principles of internal audit. So let us look at the 18 standards that were issued prior to 1st July 2013. So these were the 18 standards that were issued. And out of these 18 standards, 10 standards have got either revised or superseded. And those standards which are revised or superseded are highlighted in red font. And in place of these, there are now 13 new principle-based SIs. The remaining 8 standards, which are in blue font, continue to exist as on date. So let's look at the preface to the framework and standards on internal audit. The revised preface to the framework and standards on internal audit, which was issued in November 2018, is not yet mandatory. The standards on internal audit set the minimum requirements that apply to all members of our institute. It also recommends adoption of these SIs by non-members in order to ensure that there is a consistent approach and quality in the discharge of their professional duties. Because under the Companies Act today, even non-CAs can perform internal audit. And if non-CAs are performing internal audit, this preface recommends that non-members should follow the SIs. The SIs principle-based and outline the objective of the standard of internal audit. Each standard has key sections such as introduction, objective, requirements, explanatory comments on implementation and application, and effective date. In addition to SIS, there are guidance notes, that's implementation guide and technical guides also, which are being covered under this preface, and these are recommendatory in nature. However, the members are ordinarily expected to comply with these recommendations. Let's look at the framework now. The framework governing internal audits is an overarching document to be read along with the preface. It consists of definition of internal audit, code of ethics, and there are 4 components which are supposed to be pillars of the framework. These 4 components are basic principles of internal audit, key concepts, standards on internal audit, and guidance. The most important underlying principle is code of ethics, which every member is expected to comply with. The code of ethics either issued by the organization or the institute where the member is a member. Let's look at the definition now. Framework has defined internal audit, and this definition forms the underlying foundation of all the standards on internal audit issued by the board. Internal audit activities should be conducted in line with the definition of internal audit. Let's look at the definition of internal audit as given under the revised framework governing internal audits issued by ICI, as well as the definition as per the Institute of Internal Auditors. If we look at these two definitions, there are key terms that come out of these definitions, which are independent, internal controls and risk management, governance, and organizational objectives. So what is the definition here is basically it says that internal audit provides independent assurance to the effectiveness of internal controls and risk management processes to enhance governance and achieve organizational objectives. Let's look at the basic principles of internal audit. Originally, it was SIA 2 that got issued in August 2007 and was recommendatory in nature. The revised basic principles of internal audit, which was issued in November 2018, is not yet made mandatory. It is an overarching document for all standards on internal audit. These basic principles are critical to achieve the objectives of internal audit definition. Any departure from these principles should be disclosed in the internal audit report or similar communication. When I say similar communication, it could mean that it's a presentation to the management, it's a presentation to the audit committee. Now, what could be the departures? I mean, there are 10 core basic principles which are laid down under this SI. So we'll look at that. But one of that talks about risk-based audit approach. So if risk-based audit approach has not been followed, the risk assessment has not been done, then you are expected to report this departure from the core principles. The main objective of this basic principles are to ensure that all internal audits are conducted with certain fundamental features which are designed to establish the credibility of the internal auditor and outline the essential elements of internal audit activities. As a result of which, the outcome of internal audits is of quality and is in line with the set objectives. Okay, so it basically establishes the credibility of internal auditor and outlines the essential elements in order to ensure that the outcome is of quality. What are these 10 basic principles? There are 10 core principles fundamental to the internal audit function and activities. The 10 principles are listed down on the slide. As you can see, the first 5 principles, which are independence, integrity and objectivity, due profession care and confidentiality, and skills and competence, right? These 5 principles establishes the credibility of the internal auditor, and the remaining 5 are the essential components of risk of internal audit activities. In the interest of time, I do not propose to go through all of these 10 principles, but a couple of them I can definitely touch upon. One is on confidentiality. Confidentiality is something which is of is very important, and one needs to ensure that the data, the information that is made available to the internal auditor, that confidentiality is fully maintained. It should be shared only on need-to-know basis and not otherwise, right? Many a times we hear people talking in public very loudly as a result of maybe, you know, it's not intentionally done. It could be unintentional, but what happens is because of this loud conversation, people around you are able to hear your conversation, and it may so happen that the client's confidential data may be leaked. Or many a times you end up putting some information on social media sites, again unintentionally, but confidential data may be again leaked. The other risk could be loss of laptop, where you have a lot of confidential data in the laptop. So one has to be extra cautious with regard to this confidential information. The second aspect I would like to touch upon in these principles is participate in decision making. When you read this principle, you may get a question in your mind that whether as an internal auditor you are expected to participate in decision making. The answer is no. As an internal auditor, you are not expected to participate in decision making, but you are expected to review the process that is followed for decision making and strengthen the process. The other aspect is on quality and continuous improvement. It requires the internal auditor to have a peer review mechanism in place so that the quality is met and there is a continuous improvement in the quality that you are rendering to your client. So a quick glimpse of what are the 13 SIAs, principle-based SIAs that have been issued by ISB. Under 100 series, we have 2. Under 200 series, there are 4. And under 300 series, there are 7 SIAs that have been issued as on date. There aren't any SIAs that have been issued under 400 series onwards. There are 400 to 700 series where there aren't any SIs. These are the 8 old SIs which were issued as on 1st July 2013, and these continue as on date. To the best of my knowledge, there aren't any exposure drafts available. However, ISB has formed a study group which is actively working on drafting other standards. Now we move on to SI 330, which is on internal audit documentation. Right? This is the most important standard and a comprehensive standard, I would say, which covers various aspects of internal audit documentation. There was originally SI 3, which was issued in 2007, and that has been now superseded with this SI 330, which deals with internal audit documentation. Internal audit documentation refers to written record, both electronic or otherwise, of the internal audit procedures that have been performed, the relevant audit evidence that have been obtained, and conclusions that have been reached by the internal auditor on the basis of such procedures and evidences. These are also termed as work papers or working papers. The internal auditor is expected to record and collate all the evidences obtained in the form of complete and sufficient audit documentation. There are certain key requirements in the process of collection, preparation, retention, and subsequent review of internal audit documentation. The nature and content of this documentation is in a separate implementation guide. What are the objectives of preparing complete and sufficient audit documentation? The objectives are: 1 is to validate the audit findings. 2, it helps in the supervision and review of internal audit work that has been performed. And 3rd, it establishes that the work has been performed in conformance with the applicable pronouncements and the standards. Overall objective is, of course, to form an opinion on the outcome of the assignment. It includes written records in the form of reproducible documents. I mean, if it is a digital document, it should be reproducible so that it can be made available as and when required. Content and extent of documentation is a matter of professional judgment. It is very difficult to define as to what all should be there in your documentation, but every significant matter needs to be documented adequately. As I said, it's a matter of profession judgment. One needs to ensure basically that the documents are sufficient and complete to avoid the need for follow-up inquiry. It's useful and relevant to the objectives of the audit procedures. It can undergo at least one level of review or approval. Under the SIS, it's necessary that the person who has done the work gets reviewed by a senior person. There is a peer review or a senior person review. So at least one level of review one should be able to perform on. And at the end of the day, that person also should reach the same conclusion basis the documentation that is available. The documentation should be collated and arranged logically in files and includes quality checks. So when we say quality checks, right, the quality checks would include checks such as completeness, check of relevance, right, check of compliance with the standards. So all these checks have to be performed and the files have to be arranged in a logical manner and it has to be indexed and cross-referenced adequately so that peer review can be performed. It can be a cold review. The person who has prepared need not be present when the peer review is happening. One thing which is very important to note is that the ownership and custody of these working papers will remain with the internal auditor. Right? Many a times these days we come up with a situation where the client believes that their data is very confidential, highly confidential, and hence cannot be shared. So what they insist is basically the internal auditor has to necessarily be present in their premises, has to necessarily work on their servers, and also maintain our documentation in their servers only. So in such a situation, one can comply with the client's request. However, the access of that documentation necessarily has to be with internal auditor. The client should not have access as the ownership remains with the internal auditor. And a clause to that effect has to be incorporated in the engagement letter. And not only that, the path and the folder where these files are maintained should also be documented. The retention of these files is of utmost importance. Typically, it would vary with the legal and company's retention policy requirements. But generally, what we have seen is that 8 to 10 years is the retention period. And it may go beyond 8 to 10 years if there is any dispute or if there is any legal case that's pending. All the client data cannot be shared with any third party unless and until internal auditor obtains legal advice or requisite approval from the client. The standard also mentions that timely completion of documentation is of utmost importance. The final report can be released only and only after all significant audit evidences have been collected and documented. However, the standard has given a period of 60 days within which the files can be arranged administratively after the final report gets issued. So as per the standard, what is the documentation that is mandatory is one, your written documentation documentation policy and process should be part of your internal audit manual, right? What should be documented, how, when, where, and who should document, who should review, who should approve with proper referencing, cross-referencing. All these needs to be adequately documented in order to comply with this standard. All SIs, whether they are principle-based or old SIs, emphasize on documentation. So let us quickly capture key requirements of documentation as per principle-based SIs. So when we look at SI 110, which is managing the internal audit function, right, the key elements that need to be documented are the internal audit process should be documented in the form of internal audit manual, the resource plan, the progress monitoring reports of various assignments that are underway along with their budgets and actuals, and quality evaluation and improvement program should also be documented adequately. SI 220, which deals with conducting overall internal audit planning, states that all key activities that have been performed during the planning process should be adequately documented. Now, when we talk about key activities, it basically covers understanding the business, understanding its operations, the systems and processes of the client, understanding the past issues, the known issues, or if there are any new issues that have come up during the year, understanding the changes during the year, having basically discussions and interviews with various key stakeholders and documenting the minutes of those discussions, the communications that may be available. The risk assessment documentation should also be made available. Also, the available resources along with their skill sets and competences should be matched with the requirements of the audits. And finally, the internal audit plan should be duly approved by competent authorities such as audit committee and be on the record. Let's see now this SI 220, which is on objectives of internal audit. The objectives of internal audit and the operating parameters of these things. When we say operating parameters, it could be things like, the TAT has been defined, the escalation matrix has been defined. All these have to be formally recorded. If it is an in-house team, it should be recorded by way of an internal audit charter. If it is outsourced partly or fully, then it has to be recorded in a formal agreement as engagement letter. And a signed engagement letter should be obtained prior to commencement of any audit work in order to ensure that there is no ambiguity or scope creep. In case there are any changes to the terms of the engagement, after the commencement of the engagement, then at the earliest, the amendment should be made and signed by both the parties. At times, the internal audit team or internal audit department may come up with a situation where all the required skill sets may not be available in-house or with the service provider. So in that case, one needs to evaluate the requirement of an expert. Like in case of an insurance company, you may need to take services from an actuary, or if you're doing an internal audit of oil and gas company, you may need services of a technical expert there. So basically this standard gives you that option of using the work of an expert and relying on the work of an expert. However, there are certain procedures that are required to be performed to validate the requirement of an expert, to validate the independence and objectivity of the expert, to verify the qualification and credentials, to define the scope, approach, and work plan, and finally to evaluate the quality and reliability of the work that has been completed. So when all these procedures are performed, these are supposed to be documented, and that is what the standard stipulates that needs to be documented. Now we talk about SI 310, which is planning the internal audit assignment. This is similar to SI 220, which is conducting overall internal audit planning, whereas this is talking about an auditable unit only. However, the process that you follow for planning internal audit of a unit is more or less similar to that of an overall entity. So the planning checklist, the tools, the understanding obtained for units, business, operations, systems, and processes that needs to be documented, any past or known issues, the status of those issues, any changes during the year, minutes of discussion with various key stakeholders, their inputs, all these again have to be documented. The risk assessment and the summary of risk mitigating controls should be documented. And of course, again, the available resource planning of deployment of these resources depending on their competencies and matching with their skill sets, the internal audit program, individual programs, and the final internal audit assignment plan for the unit duly approved should be documented. We move on now to the next standard, which deals with internal audit evidence. The overall objective of obtaining appropriate and reliable evidence is to allow the internal auditor to form an opinion on the outcome of audit procedures that have been performed. The evidence collected must stand on its own and not require any follow-up clarification or additional information to arrive at the same conclusion. So as per this standard, the policy and process that should be followed for on audit evidence should be documented as part of internal audit manual, and details that have been collected should be documented adequately along with the audit findings and opinion that have been formed. In fact, when these evidences are obtained at that point in time, it's very important to ensure that, you know, there is, if there is any exception, then that evidence has to be obtained, because at times we have seen in the past that if we do not obtain that evidence, the clients have rectified or ratified the issue that have been pointed out, and then we are not able to really, you know, put up our observation as a valid observation. So it's very important. It's not possible to collect all the evidences for all the samples that we are tested. It may not be possible, but at least where exceptions are found, please ensure that we have those evidences in our file so that, you know, the disputes, if any, are addressed appropriately. The documentation, the procedures that we have performed, the testing we have done, the attributes we have tested, all this needs to be documented by way of testing templates. And in the testing template, instead of merely saying yes or no, one needs to document adequately as to what has been tested, who has approved it, what was the level of the person who approved, name of the person, and so on and so forth, so that it not only supports our finding, but it also would aid in review mechanism. So as I was talking about the review mechanism, again here it says that the process of review and supervision needs to be documented adequately as part of our internal audit manual. The preparer has to document the work done and the date on which the work has been performed, and reviewer has to document the reviewer's queries, the date when these queries were raised and the review was performed, and finally how these queries were addressed also should be documented. The extent of review would typically depend on the reviewer, on the reviewer's professional judgment. It would depend on to what extent the reviewer is comfort with the documentation that has been made available. SI 360 communication with management. This is the standard which my fellow speaker CA Ruchi is going to take in detail, but I would basically touch upon the documentation aspect. Here again, the standard says that the internal audit manual should have a documented policy on what should be the communication process and protocol that should be followed. So basically, it should cover aspects such as what should be communicated, when it should be communicated, whom and where, and how the communication should happen, right? The escalation matrix also should be defined in this protocol. At times, there would be certain essential information which would be exchanged either by way of email or by way of verbal communication. It could be discussion. All these should be adequately documented and it should be properly cross-referenced. One example I would like to share here would be, in case the draft report has been shared with the client post issuance of draft report, if the client has provided additional information, then that additional information should be taken into consideration, basis which either the observation may get dropped or it may get deleted. So all these documentation should be adequately documented and cross-referenced. This is a standard on reporting results, which again, CA Ruchi is going to be talking about in detail. But one thing again here I would like to mention is that no final report can be issued unless and until the draft report has been shared with the auditee. And the internal audit report should be issued within a reasonable time frame from the completion of internal audit work. Many times it happens that we complete the work in time, but because the management responses are pending, are getting delayed, the report gets delayed. So under such situations, then it's advisable that we send written reminders and follow-up communication by way of email or whatever. And if necessary, it should be brought to the attention of senior management as well as those charged with governance. Monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues. This is something which is very important from audit committee perspective as well, right? Every committee meeting, the audit committee would want to know as to what the status is of the earlier audit issues. And there has to be adequate documentation from internal auditor's point of view also, because there would be a monitoring plan that would have been agreed with the management and the auditee. So how that plan has been complied with, whether the auditee has implemented those actions as agreed, or if not implemented or partially implemented, the reasons thereof needs to be presented. And whatever implementation has happened, the internal auditor has to verify and confirm and document the same basis the audit procedures that have been performed. The escalation communication also should be in place if there are no action plans that have been implemented. Periodic status report has to be presented both to the management and those charged with governance. So we come to the slide of the significance of documentation. So we saw that there is a separate SIA on documentation. Also, we saw that every SIA, principle-based SIA, as well as old SIAs, which we haven't really discussed in this presentation, stipulate the requirement of documentation. Why is it given so much of importance? Let's understand the purpose and the benefits of documentation. Why is documentation necessary? When is it required to be documented? what should be documented, where it should be documented, and who should document. I think these are the 5 questions which every internal auditor should ask herself or himself, and then apply the professional judgment basically to document the work that has been performed. So as we can see, though it's a long list, it's not an exhaustive list. So please don't think that this is the exhaustive list. Let's look at some of these which we can quickly touch upon. This documentation would assist, right, the reviews, both institutes peer review, the internal reviews if you have in your organization, the review mechanism, as well as third party reviews. Third party reviews may come up as part of maybe due diligence or acquisitions and mergers, or it could be on account of other reasons also. The documentation would support you in case of insurance claims, if there are any frauds or litigation or disputes. It establishes the compliance with regulatory and professional requirements and standards. It helps in achieving the defined objectives of internal audit because it helps in planning performance reviews and it supports the conclusion. As per SA 610 revised, which is on using the work of internal auditors, the statutory auditor can use the work of internal auditor. So internal auditor can be of assistance to statutory auditor, and that will be possible only if there is adequate documentation, because the statutory auditor has to review certain aspects before it can come to that conclusion. Similarly, for IFCO-FR testing and reporting, both by management as well as statutory auditor, internal auditor can be of assistance, which will bring in efficiencies and cost reduction. One must always remember that documentation is an ongoing process and it covers the entire life cycle of the engagement. It must be completed prior to issuance of the final report. I've seen cases where the internal auditor sits down on documentation only towards the end of the internal audit, which is not correct at all, because at this point in time it will become very difficult for the internal auditor to really recollect the work that has been performed, recollect the observations and the findings and how those were resolved, to remember and document. So it has to be documented on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis. It covers all aspects, right from acceptance of an engagement to planning, the risk assessment, the internal control assessment, audit procedures that have been performed, the evidences that have been obtained, the minutes of various meetings, the observations, findings that the internal auditor has come up with, communication, reporting, and so on. Right? So the various checklists, the templates should be standardized to the extent possible, and it should be documented as and when the audit is progressing at every stage. As I mentioned earlier, it should stand on its own and no additional information should be required for the same conclusion. Confidentiality, privacy, and security of the working papers is of utmost importance, and it has to be maintained without any compromise. The files, both manual as well as electronic files, should be archived and retained for a period of 8 to 10 years, depending on whatever your organization's policy is. But it has to be retained so that as and when needed, if at all needed in future, you are able to retrieve the file and you are able to demonstrate the quality work that was performed. Finally, coming to the conclusions slide, right? Remember the golden words: work not documented is work not done. So how much ever work you may have done, you may have spent hours together, days together, but if you have not documented, it's as good as not done. And the file should speak for itself. In your absence, an independent person, be it peer reviewer, be it an investigator, be it an inspection file, it should stand on its own and it should speak for itself. So I think the questions we are going to take towards the end. I would like to thank you all for the patient hearing. Thank you so much. Over to you, Navalji. You are on mute, Navalji.
Thank you, Nita ma'am, for the wonderful deliberation on the documentation part, which is very essential for internal audit, and all fraternity members have definitely benefited from your experience. Now, participants, I would like to introduce CA Ruchi Sadhana ma'am. She having the very vast industry experience. She is SRCC alumni and did her CA in May 1997 in first attempt with rank in All India merit list in CA finals. She is also a cost accountant and certified Sarbanes auxiliary expert. Ruchi ma'am having 24 years of post-qualification experience, and she heads the Corporate Audit and Assurance Service Department for HCL Technology Limited, a leading USD 10 billion global IT company with presence in approx 45 countries. She has been the part of CA Institute study group responsible for reviewing the auditing standards and drafted 3 audit standards, SIA 250, 350, and 390. So now over to Ruchi ma'am.
Thanks, Navalji, for your kind words, and many thanks, Nita, for such a wonderful presentation. Good evening, everyone on the dais and off the dais, all the audience. I'll just share my screen. If it's visible, just do let me know. So my screen is visible?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I'll take you guys with through two very important SIAs, which we generally use every day, especially communication with the management and reporting results, which is required after every audit we complete or during the audit also. So I'll start with communication with management, SI 360. I'll just shift this. Okay. So primarily, what is communication? As per the standard, communication is expression, even verbal with sign and everything. But here, any exchange of information between internal audit and management is supposed to be treated as communication here for this particular standard. And management is what has been defined as the managed people with the executive responsibility for to run the company's operations. It has to be two-way communication, which is very, very important for for ensuring that we have right kind of communication, and our assignments and whatever we are expecting, that we are accomplishing whatever objectives internal audit has. So we generally have two-way communication in the various stages of the audit, with the management while we prepare the audit plan. When we prepare the audit plan, management advises us that, we generally go and seek management advice also, though we consider risk and all, we look into the risk universe, audit universe, but then we generally prefer to have this kind of communication with the management that, what all the areas they feel that they require the audit to be done, or if there is any kind of change in the strategy of the organization where we have to shift the focus of the audits. So even while preparing for the audit plan, we should seek their information we should communicate with them. We should consider whatever they are advising us to do. That cannot be ignored, and we should always try to have communication with them. Then we do the intimation of audit when we have the audit plan prepared, approved. Then at that, before we actually start the audit, we give the intimation, and intimation can be of two types, or it can be the two steps. One is that we are giving a generic intimation that we are planning to start this audit with effect from future date, and then generally auditors try to visit them and try to understand the assignment, and then create a scope and objective of the audit. And after that, generally we release the formal engagement letter. So the engagement letter is addressed to all the process owners, the senior management also, where we are giving in detail what exactly we are doing the audit. The audit has to be done as per plan, and this particular period would be covered as a part of the audit. These many locations would be covered as a part of audit. Basically, objective of the audit and the scope of audit is advised as the part of engagement letter, along with the names of the auditors who will be doing this audit and the audit lead and all. And this generally is being sent by the audit head, or the person in charge who is taking care of the audits. So that is so it can be done in two steps, or it can be direct engagement letter which can be released. Sometimes there is no need to give the intimation, and if we know that area very well, we can just release the engagement letter. There's no need to go for giving intimation and doing the groundwork. Then we have the opening meeting, where we expect the representation of the management, also some representation from the management, because if the management presence is there, then we always can ensure that the process owners and even the junior people, the people who are supposed to give the documentation, they understand the gravity of situation, and they know that they have to take this audit seriously and give the information in time. So opening meeting is done to understand. It's a high level opening meeting which is done just to make sure that auditors and auditees meet with each other, and they plan how to complete this audit. Then regular updates are being shared with the management regarding the status of the audit. Though sometimes people try to release draft report and final report, but then regular updates we should also share with the management, and that I'll cover in my second SIA, which is 370. The details how we should actually share the results of the whatever audit we have done. Then we can always we should share the challenges also. Audit is not always a cakewalk. We face many challenges, so it's better to keep management updated on the challenges. And sometimes the communication is from the management also. They also would like to share with audit head the kind of challenges the process owners are facing while the audit is going on. So all this is again a two-way communication. Significant findings also audit head should share with the management if it is something related to the fraudulent transaction or anything which has a serious impact on the company's objective. That should be shared with the management. And how would we share that? I'll explain in the next SIA. Then we generally have the closing meeting, where again the communication is there, and where the report which has been released or about to get released, that's discussed in detail. And again, after we complete everything, then follow up and updates or the implementation for agreed action plan. There again, if they are not being done after a particular period and all, management is to be communicated for the same. So every point there is a two-way communication. It's not that it's auditor's responsibility only to keep on informing management. Even management keeps on talking to auditors, and a continuous dialogue with auditor and the management is at the various stages of audit is always important, essential to achieve the internal audit objectives. Otherwise, if the continuous dialogue is not there and you are doing the audit in silos, not necessary that your report will get the kind of favorable reception you are expecting it to get. There's something which I mentioned, that for essentially what are the essentials for the effective communication? It has to be accurate, objective, clear, concise, constructive, complete, and timely. So when we talk about accurate, the auditor or even the management, they can't afford, it has to be error free. We can't afford to give something for which we don't have the basis. It has to be accurate. This is a very, very important thing. It becomes an integrity issue if we give, or auditor would lose the credibility if there is anything wrong in the kind of communication, or you don't have the strong basis of whatever you are communicating. So your communication has to be accurate all the time. You have to take due care for that your communication has to be accurate. We can't afford to have iota of error in our communication. Objective is that it should be unbiased. It's only we are talking about the facts and whatever professional judgment we are applying. So it has to be objective. It should not be biased, or it should be clear cut. It should have the objectivity that we are not influenced by anyone, and we are just communicating basing whatever the information or the data is available with us. It has to be clear, no scope of any confusion when we are talking to the management. It has to be absolutely clear, concise, preferably, because management generally has a very small span of attention. I mean, they are supposed to handle many things. So you can't give stories to them. You just have to, your communication has to be very, very concise in any and every stage of the audit or of the audit also. It has to be extremely concise so that, they grab whatever you are trying to say quickly. We can't afford to start giving them the stories and all. They don't have that much of time. It has to be constructive. See, the way we are communicating our audit results or any significant findings or challenges, it should not have the negativity. It should be little positively framed the way we are communicating. So it should look like as if we are trying to help the organization. So it's not that everything is wrong. I mean, the way we should communicate is that if we do these things, it will give this much of benefit. So even if the things are negative, we have to give a communication should be constructive. It should not bring a lot of negativity, which is which generally nobody would like to take. Our communication has to be complete. It's not that half baked or half information we are giving to the management, and because again the auditor or the audit head would lose the credibility if their communication is incomplete. You are giving the half story, and then the process owner is coming up with another story where you saw only this particular portion and you missed something important. You did not see it completely, and we are going to the management with the incomplete information or the half-baked stories. So our communication with the management has to be complete, and it has to be timely. If the communication is done late, it has no relevance. So we have to have, whether we are releasing the report, it has to be timely release of the report. Whether we are informing about any significant finding, it has to be done in a timely fashion. So we can't afford to give something, which is a very old news to the management. We have to give them whatever communication we have to have with them has to be timely. So we'll move to the next slide. So objective and the requirement of this standard is that we should have the clarity and consensus between auditor as well as management. So the communication has to be clear, and we should have the consensus with the internal auditor and management with respect to the scope, approach, objective, and the timings of audit. See, why we have to have this consensus is it is very, very important for the success of the audit. So if we have the objective which we are trying to achieve out of that particular audit, the management should be in sync with that. I mean, that is something which they are expecting also, because we are doing this thing, to align our objective with the organization objective. So, you can't go in the next direction when organization objective and the management is working towards Y direction. So it has to be aligned. So it is better to have the consensus of the audit objective. Otherwise, the whole exercise is futile for management. Then the kind of scope which we are finalizing also needs to be having the consensus with the management, is because if you have to cover a particular audit, suppose payroll audit, so you have to decide that, we'll cover these many countries or these many branches or these many locations, or it has to be covered in all, the complete population would be covered in this particular audit. So where management would feel that, yeah, I feel that, this area may have some issues, please go ahead with that. Or you have done some kind of analysis and you want to approach them, and there are certain problems which already management knows for that particular area, and they said, we have already got the audit done from an external consultant, and here is a report, there's no point covering that area. So there should be consensus on the scope of the audit. Or suppose for the period also, you want to have a very small period, they want to have a little larger period. So there has to be consensus, and we have to really see that, the larger period we will be able to complete in that particular time, yes or no. If not, then, we have to reduce something from the scope of audit with respect to location or with respect to any other branch or something like that, so that, we all are having the same, we all are on the same page. Then approach, whether we are going to cover the population or we are going to cover the sample, approximately what should be the sampling, and whether I'm going to do this audit manually, or I'm going to use some kind of tools and all to do this. So those things can be, though approach may not have too much of area where where management would be interested. However, sometimes, like we all use the ERPs. So approach can be that, whatever the information from ERP, management can say that, let the internal auditor have the complete rights and let them extract the information themselves. We don't want to use our process owners for, taking out the population from the ERP. So that kind of approach can always be discussed, because the auditor may be thinking that they will give me the data. However, the management is thinking that we don't have the bandwidth, let auditor do the audit and take out the information themselves from the ERP directly, we'll give the accesses. So all these things have to be, clarity should be there between internal auditor and management, and consensus should be there. We should all be on the same page. Then with management, there should be free flow of the information. It's not that, you are going via somebody, via process owner to management. It's a free flow between internal audit head and internal audit leads with the management. So it has to be free flow of information. It should not be via something. It should not be any restricted flow of information. And then, sometimes there's a conflict also. So how the conflict would be resolved is also has been guided in this particular standard, is that, internal audit head would be in the position, or the partner, if it is an external firm, should be in the position to take the ownership of resolving the conflict between the process owners and the auditors, if any. They should jointly be sitting, and they should be resolving the conflict. So the requirement of the standard is, as per the standards requirement, this all communication shall be clear, appropriate, and in line with the agreed processes and the timelines. So internal auditor is expected to set up a written communication process with the protocol with the management. So protocol and all we'll discuss in the next slide also, but we can discuss it now also. Internal audit head should actually have a proper communication process documented, that, up to the process manager or the process owner, this level of people can communicate, or if it has to go to the little senior people, the accountable heads and all, then only lead or the CAE should be communicating, or if some discussion has to be done by CEO, C-level, then only internal audit head would be communicating with that. So that kind of protocol should be very clearly documented. It should not be that a junior auditor is writing mail to some senior person. So that should not happen. It unnecessarily spoils the audit. I mean, people get involved into other discussions rather than finalizing the audit. So along with this, there should be some kind of escalation mechanism, how it has to be done. So all these kind of things should be clearly documented, that, if we don't get the information after so many days, then we will escalate to this level. If we don't get after these many days, we'll escalate to this level. So, and we don't get the responses, then we'll release the report. So all this should be documented, that, what would be the level of escalations and all. So, and process documentation should also outline the modes and the channels of communication. It's not that everything is happening verbal and all. Preferably in the corporate, we should use the written communication. If something, especially in the audits, if there is anything verbally which has been agreed or decided through audio calls or through phones, then preferably it should be later documented by the auditor and sent to them as a minutes of the meeting kind of thing. That really helps. Then periodicity and timelines of communication. So generally when we go for the audits and all, what would be the periodicity for sharing the updates with the management, when the reports would be released? So all these kind of things, and what kind of communication has to be done when, is all the part of the written communication process, which with the protocols which internal auditor audit head is supposed to establish within the department, the organization. And what kind of essential information would be required to be communicated when? So any essential information, if there is a significant finding, so even if you are informing them verbally, it has to be documented later on. So essential matters are concerned, verbal communication needs to be subsequently documented as a minutes, or as per our discussion, this has been agreed. So that kind of mails should always go. Otherwise, verbal things may have no relevance, because we cannot reproduce the verbal documentation. It has no relevance. And in audit field, if something has been verbally told, it's as good as not told, because people can, go back from their words anytime. So it's always important that anything verbal discussion, the important one, is subsequently documented. We'll move to the next slide. So these are some explanatory comments in SI 360 is that communication process and protocol, it should have the key element like protocol, which we just discussed, the mode of communication. Mode is like what we have mentioned: hard copy, phone, email, channel, timelines, and the content. So all this should be the key element of whatever we are establishing as a process. And then, accurate, complete, and timely communication, it is very, very important. I mean, though here there are only 3 which is mentioned, but I have given 7 in the beginning of the first slide, which we should always try to strive hard to achieve. Then modes and channels of communication, we have already discussed, whether it has to be verbal, picture, written. Periodicity and timelines of communication is that nature and timelines should be agreed with management. That's what we just discussed, that, we can take an example. Suppose you want to, whenever we are doing any audit and all also, so we have to ensure that, this is discussed with the management, like, okay, within 2.5 months, 2 months, we will give the draft report. 15 days will be given for giving the responses, or 1 week will be given for giving the responses. And then after that, we'll re-release the final report after another week. So all these kind of things should be completely documented along with the management. Essential information to be communicated, for example, the kind of nature of assurance which we are planning to give, the kind of assurance they are looking forward from the auditor, when any kind of audits are being done, or what kind of significant findings have to be communicated. So, we need to, these are just the examples of communication of the information which needs to be communicated. And we have to ensure that, in case we are saying that we are confirming the compliance to this SIA, the internal audit department should be able to produce the written communication process and the protocol, which we just discussed, that, this should be established, and documented details of all the essential information exchange. That, whatever important draft report is released, final is released, or any significant updates are released. So all this information exchange, there has to be documented. We are able to reproduce in front of in quality, or anyone in somebody if they ask us. So that these two things are very, very important in case for ensuring that we are meeting this particular SIA. So we'll move to the next one, which is reporting result, and it may have little more discussion because SIA 370. So there are two ways internal audit reports results. One is after every audit or during the audit with respect to that particular assignment only. And there is another kind of reporting of result, which is on the quarterly basis, generally for all the listed companies to the audit committee, and which internal audit head is generally supposed to do. However, this standard SIA 370 is covering the first one, where for each individual assignment, how we are supposed to report the result is being covered in this particular standard. It doesn't cover that quarterly presentation, which is or quarterly results, which internal audit has presence at large for all the audit reports to board. So that's not covered here. It's only for the individual audit reports. So we have to, in this particular thing, the objective is to that issuing the internal audit reports on significant assignment is to share with the auditee the detail of significant findings, allow management to understand the issues and take corrective action, and provide a sound basis for assurance being provided by internal audit. So these three are primarily the objective of reporting results, is primarily to highlight the effectiveness of controls and the risk management process for enhancing the governance, enhancing the level of governance. So this is primarily the objective of this particular standard. So what should be there in the report? So that is the kind of requirement which has been established, this has been recommended, is that internal audit shall issue a clear, well-documented internal audit report, which should cover, one is the objective, scope, and approach. So we'll go one by one. So objective is what you are expecting to accomplish from that particular audit. What is the objective? What you are planning to accomplish? What you are expecting the final result when you do this particular audit is the objective of the audit. Like if you want to do accounts payable, then objective of the audit can be the timely and the correct payments are being made to the vendors. That's more like an objective of the audit which is being done. Or if it is related to the employee payments, then similar. Then if it is related to the revenue, then correct revenue has been recognized and timely, and even with the collections also. So these are some of the examples of the objective which we try to achieve after we do when we are doing this particular audit, when we are taking up this particular audit. Then scope, the way we have discussed earlier in 360 also, is again it sets the boundaries of the audit. Whatever I'm going to cover, what will be outside the scope of the audit. So what all sub-processes I will cover within this process, what would be a component of the sub-processes which I'm going to cover in this particular audit, or the materiality thresholds, or the locations, or the branches. So all these things are covered as a part of the scope of audit, along with the period which is being audited. So that is also being covered as a part of the scope of audit, which should be clearly mentioned as a part of the report in the initial slides only. And approach, again, the way we have explained earlier is that, we are using a sampling approach, or we are going to work on the population. So what we have done in that particular audit, or we have used or deployed any tool to find out the exceptions. So that approach, whatever we have followed, should be part of the first slide generally of any particular audit report. Then, a fact also has to be mentioned very clearly that, this particular internal audit has been done in accordance with the standard of internal audit released by ICAI, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So it is always good to actually have that kind of fact to have the credibility of the report. Yeah, this report has been done in accordance with the standards. So executive summary of the key observations. So when we do any audit, if because the audit report goes to very senior people also, most of the senior management also, along with the process owner, and they don't want to get into the detailed observation which are written in the report in the later slide. They don't have that kind of span of attention. They have very limited time. So we have to create an executive summary of the key observation in the beginning of the deck, along with the summary of corrective action plan which are required, so that at one glance we can't keep on writing only ki, okay, this was a problem, that was a problem, this is the high risk problem which we have observed, that is the another medium risk problem I have observed. They'll get scandalized management. So we have to give little bit of action plans which are required, that if we do, though we got this observation, but this has been agreed, this has been, so they provide a comfort to the management also and the readers also, that these issues are there, however these are action plan and will kill these issues, or some correction process have been agreed with the process owner. So that will give a view to the management or the executive committee to make sure they will ensure that the auditor has already gone to the process owners, they have the consensus, and that is the reason they all are on the same page, and that is the reason I'm able to see this everything on the summary at one go. And the nature of assurance, whether it's a satisfactory report or it is satisfactory except something, or there are a lot of issues here. So whatever is the kind of nature of assurance, that should also become the part of the initial 3-4 slides only of the report. So another point which is very, very important of this particular standard is that no internal audit report will be released, final report will be released till the time the written draft report has been previously shared by the auditee. It's not that you are not shared and you are releasing only the final report after you have taken the comments, or you have issued something in the part only in the Excel, you have released something to the process owners and then you are taking. No, the draft report properly has to be released, and then only the final report has to be released, is something which is required by the standard and which is very logical also. Another thing which is very, very important in the standard is that it has to be issued within the reasonable time frame. Otherwise, the audit will lose its relevance, because you have already audited a period. And if you are releasing the report 6 months or 9 months hence, it loses its relevance. And nobody is interested in reading your report if it is released so late. People are not bothered. The world has moved a lot after you have done the audit. So it has to be released within a reasonable time frame, and that time frame also should be decided with the management. Generally, most of the audits should ideally get completed within 2.5 months, so that quarterly the report is released. So that's something which that is the reason we generally have the quarterly audit committees, and so that we can release the report in time. So I'll move to the next slide. So there are certain explanatory comments which are there in the standard. So basis of audit report would be the audit procedures conducted and analysis of the audit evidences gathered, and all these things should be documented somewhere. It should be documented in the work papers. The way Neeta explained, no documentation, no work papers means the work not done. If we cannot share that along, documented things cannot be shown on the paper on the table, then it means we have not done that particular activity. So all this, what all audit procedures we are covering and what all audit evidences, it should be documented, it should be available, and it should form the base of the report. These all are the working papers. It should form the part of the report, and that report should actually be having the conclusion which has been reached, which have been reached basis the findings, basis all the findings. Not that suppose in particular area you are doing the audit of stores and you find one particular area you find little bit one fraud which is of a very low item, or pilferages and all. So you cannot say that everything is wrong there. There are certain processes which may be working fine. So you have to give the report considering all the observation and not basis few deviation noted. So that should be the basis of our internal audit report. Then ideally it should be conducted in accordance with SIA, and this is something which I have mentioned in the initial slide also, that, we should always mention that it has been conducted in accordance with SIA if it has really been conducted considering the compliances of all the standards of the internal audit. And internal auditor is not that verbally I'm saying that, yeah, we use all the standards, we have complied all the standards. No verbal. Internal auditor is able to substantiate the same with the supporting evidence and documentation. So just verbally saying, we do everything, whatever is required by the standards, and I don't have any document to prove that, then you can't give this kind of statement. And this statement should be given, and this is required by the standard. And accordingly, we all should actually do the audit basis all these standards, and we should maintain the documentation also. Then content and format of internal audit report is how you are drafting the report. But SIA has not mandated any particular format, though they have given something that, it should have approach, scope, objective in the initial slide. Then you should have executive summary. Then you should have some action plan. Executive summary should have all this key observation along with the action plan. So though they've given some kind of hints that, this should be part of your report, but how the report will be flowing and what all should be mentioned in the observation is actually they have not given, and it has been left to the professional judgment of the internal auditor. So this has not been recommended. There's no fixed format which has been recommended by institute or through this standard. Though in the next slide, I will share that what all should be the component that again is recommendatory. I've given that institute has not advised that, or standard does not talk about that. We'll cover that in the next slide. Basis my experience and basis what the best practices is, what all should be there is there in the next slide. Then documentation is that to confirm the compliance of the audit procedure, the list of documentation which is required is the copies of the draft internal report, draft and final internal report, and the cross-reference to the specific observation. And if possible, because nowadays we all live in the, we all have email system. So countersigning is practically not possible, though it is recommended by standard that, if appropriate, you can have the sign off. However, in most of the companies, generally we send a mail to them and we say that, we say either get the okay, or we say that this is something which we have agreed. Generally, if they don't say okay, then also we can always say that, if we don't get okay, we are assuming that it has been approved or accepted by you. So that email should also serve the purpose, and that email should be saved. Physical countersigning may not be possible, though standards suggest that it should be done. We'll move to the next slide, and this is something is the suggestive components for the presentation of the observations. So when we are presenting, though they have mentioned that, you should have objective, scope, approach as the first slide, and some of the audit reports we have seen, you generally try to give, suppose you are covering any particular expense, you try to give the quantum of that expense, or you try to give the trend of that expense in the initial slide, so that management or whosoever is reading that report gets a fair idea that, whether this is a material area where we have to invest time in reading the executive summary and the observations. So sometimes that is also given. It gives the gravity to the report that, this is an important area which should have been covered, and we have covered this area. That is the reason we did the audit of this area. So initial 2-3 slides are related to that particular expense and the objective, scope, approach, then summary and statement that, we have met all the standards, complied to all the standards. So those 3-4 things are the initial slides. However, when we go to the actual observations, this is again suggestive, not given in the standard, but it talks about, we generally, it's a best practice to give, because within the audit, you have got various sub processes. So when you are giving any observation, try to give the background, one paragraph or few lines on the background which can talk about that particular sub process and what should be there. And then the observation or process gap, whatever has been agreed or whatever is the laid down process, the following is the gap or the instances which we have noted as part of the audit. Then we should give the risk also. Generally, you can, instead of writing risk as high, medium, low, you can, on the slide, you can have on the top right corner, you can have the button of red, amber, green, yellow. Red can be for high risk. Amber can be for the medium risk, and yellow can be low risk. Green if that area has no observation. So that way you can actually give the risk rating instead of writing high, medium, low somewhere in the, because we have limited space also within the slide to present. Then we should give the impact. If there is any financial impact, we should try to give that kind of impact also. It again gives more credibility to your observation, and your observation carries a good weight if you give the financial impact or any qualitative impact of that particular observation, which you have pointed out as a part of the audit. Then we should try to have the root cause. It can be a design issue. The process itself is not laid down properly, or it can be the operating effectiveness, that you have the process laid down. However, still the people are not following it, which is more like an operating effectiveness. So you can generally, in this particular thing, root cause you can mention, but again, in that button of high, medium, and low risk, you can write P is a process level gap, or T is a transaction gap. T is more like an operating effectiveness, and T is a design issue, is a process level gap. So it's just a suggestion. You can do that. But root cause should be mentioned, because root cause is very, very important, because killing root cause only will ensure that this observation does not repeat in future. So root cause is very important. We can't give root cause, and risk is very important. If there is a risk, it is a gap. If it is not a risk, then it is actually a process improvement. It's because people generally get confused while they are drafting the report, that, this is not happening, that is not happening. But you have to identify that if these all things are not happening, is it giving some risk to me, to the organization? If the risk is not there, then it is actually a more like a process improvement kind of thing, that, it's good to have. But that actually is not a risk is not there, then it is actually not a gap. It is only a recommendation to improve the process. So it is very important to have risk as well as root cause, because risk will define whether the process, whatever you have pointed out, your observation is a gap or it is just an improvement. And root cause will actually help you in finding out what should be the preventive action to make sure that this thing does not happen or repeat in the future. Because audits are not done only to, as a tick in the checkbox that, okay, this particular point has occurred here, and now we have taken the corrective plan. It's okay. No, we have to have the preventive action plan, because if management wants the audit to be done, so that they want to kill the issue, or any issue can be killed only when you have a preventive action plan also in place. So while you give the recommendation, please ensure you are giving preventive as well as corrective, both the recommendation. One only corrective will not help the organization, because next time, 6 months hence, you do the audit, you will find the same observation, and management will feel that, what is the use? Every time you come up with the same thing, no improvement in the control is happening. So for improving the control, and it is very, very important for internal auditor to actually improve the purpose of internal audit is not to find out the observation. The purpose of internal audit is to improve the controls. So controls can be improved only when you have the right kind of preventive recommendation and the action plan. So after that, we should have the management comment also in that particular slide. Management should be given an opportunity to explain why it has happened. So if they want to explain that why it has happened, and that can be a part of the management comment. Please pay focus here that management comment is different than the action plan which management is agreeing. Management comments generally talk about in what circumstances it has happened, and they generally, if you go and talk to the management, they would have some kind of comments that why we could not stop this, and why this observation has come out, because it was a manual error, the person was new. So those kind of things can be captured in the management comment, because they are also, we should give them the chance to be heard, and whatever they want to mention can be 1-2 liners can be mentioned in that particular slide. Then we should have the preventive and corrective both action plan from the management, which will kill this issue, and whatever action they are going to make, if any recovery is to be done, then recovery of this will be done by this date. And preventive is that we are fixing something in the application so that this kind of issues will not come, and action date for that. So action plan and action date both have to be for preventive as well as corrective. Then after that, actionable head name should be there. Generally, the process owners are the actionable heads who are supposed to take care of this, make sure that these action plans are completed within the action date. And then accountable heads who are like department heads or who are the senior people, because final accountability lies with them. And especially when these reports go to the board and all, the senior level management is also endorsing to it. You get their endorsement. Yeah, this observation was right. So their names also should be very much visible on the slide, though we cannot afford to have their signature, but their names and designations should be there. So that was all from my side. Thank you so much. Thanks, Navalji. I'll just shift my, just a second. Sorry.
Thanks, Ruchi ma'am, for the wonderful deliberation.
Is my screen still visible or it's gone?
It's visible, but not
how
on
to
full screen. Yeah.
Stop share? Okay, sorry. We generally work on Teams, so it's little difficult for us to handle this anyways. Thank you so much, Navalji and Nitin Kataria and ICI for giving me this opportunity. I'm there for any questions if the audience have.
Thank you, Ruchi ma'am, for sharing your practical experience on the aspect of communications and the reporting results. I hope the fraternity members have benefited a lot. Now, dear participants, we have the question and answer sessions, and so we'll take up 10 minutes time to take all the questions with our panelists. So first of all, we have a question from Rajkishore Prasad Shah. He wants to know what are the new standards for internal audit.
What are the new standards for internal audit?
Yeah.
I think I had presented that slide which gave 13 new principle-based standards. Right? So does that person want me to give the names again, or what exactly that person wants to know? I'm not too sure.
I think a specific questions has not put forth by dear participants. Rajkishore Prasad Shah. He just wanted to know new standard for internal audit, and that has already been explained in the slide by Nita ma'am. I think participants is satisfied right now.
It's very much there, must be there in ICI site also, website. If they Google, they'll get the list of the standards.
Now the next questions from Mr. Kapil Gupta. Are these applicable to companies also?
These standards are recommendatory in nature at this point in time. So once the standards become mandatory under the Companies Act, it has been stated that it will apply first to all listed companies, and then year later it would apply to other companies as well.
but they are recommendatory in nature. So, it is always better to use this standard, and they should comply to these standards.
Now we have the question from CA Harpreet Singh Puri. Why have internal audit standard not yet been made mandatory, and what are the consequences for an internal auditor not complying with the standard laid down by IASB?
I think the council members can tell us better on this as to why it has not been made mandatory yet.
I think they have already taken up with the government. It's not that, they have not taken it up with government. The decision has not come as yet. So therefore, these are recommendatory, and as a good professional, we should have the best practices, and these standards are also part of the best practices. Even the similar kind of, these internal audit standards are similar in nature, which even IIA has also come out with. So, they expect all the auditors, internal auditors are expected to use these standards for when they do the audits.
Yeah, the point over here would be that these standards which have been issued by our institute, right, as and when it becomes mandatory, the members of the institute will have to necessarily comply with. Whereas internal audit can be performed by non-CAs as well, and institute cannot really compel them to follow these standards, though it has said that it's recommendatory that non-CA members also adopt this. So that, I guess, difference is always going to be there, to what extent non-CA members really comply with the standards. So I think this is one matter which will have to be addressed before it really becomes mandatory, in my view.
Now we have a question from CA Salab Agarwal. If management response is considerably delayed, can the final report be issued without the response?
Generally, I'll answer that. So generally, in a quarterly basis, internal audit head is to present to the audit committee that, this is the status of the audit. So in case the response is not there, management generally would never like to go in front of audit committee saying that, because of we not giving the response, the audits are getting delayed. So if you are not giving the response, you can't release the report because it should have. But at the same time, this can be presented to the audit committee saying that, we are not getting these responses despite so many things. So this is something which we have concluded as if they have no answers. And then management has to respond in front of audit committee, the board members, which they will never like to get into that kind of situation.
Okay, now we have a question from VR Apparao. How to communicate when senior management involvement in fraud suspect?
So, management also is not only one person. There are a lot many people. And if the internal audit head feels that it is the senior most person is involved, then they have the channel open with the audit committee chairman. They can always inform to them. We have other standards of communication with the board and all. So these kind of matter need to be reported to the audit committee chairman directly by the internal audit head.
Now we have the last question from CAK Raj Gopal. What is the concept of value creation in internal audit? Please explain with examples.
Right. So basically what we are talking about here is that a company where, the internal auditor is going to be performing the internal audit, the expectation is that the internal auditor is not only going to preserve the value, but also create value. So as part of creation of value, the internal auditor is expected to look at the various processes, the best practices across the industries, and come up with some suggestions whereby, the company, the organization is able to benefit It could be by way of cost saving, for example, right? So it can come up with certain suggestions and enhance the processes, enhance the governance processes, whereby you come up with some ideas and provide those ideas, or the controls, or suggest some ways in which the value is created. At the end of the day, what you mean by creating value is, it could be value in terms of reputation to the organization, it could be cost saving, it could be stoppage of revenue leakage, it could be increase in revenue also.
The kind of recommendation which are generally being given are, and those the controls which are getting built basis those recommendation, is all the value creation by the internal audit, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So this was the last question. So now we have CA Nishant Kumarji, Secretary of Gurgaon branch of NRIC. Over to Nishantji.
Thank you, Navalji. Thank you for providing me this opportunity. And but I would like to thank the Internal Audit Standard Board for organizing this program with the Gurugram branch of NIRC of ICI. ISB always do the very useful and the quality programs. So I always, not only for this program, I would like to thank ISB for continuously doing the value programs which adds value to the knowledge of the members. So this is a special thanks to ISB. And we would like to also thank the speakers of today's session. Nita Shah-ji, she explained the documentation in very detailed aspects and the basics of the internal audit and the process aspects as well. So documentation is the key for the any audit, not only the internal audit, for any audit, documentation is the key. So these aspects will help the members in adding value to their audits. Thank you, Nita Shah-ji, for sparing your valuable time for explaining these aspects with the practical measures to the members. We would also like to thank CA Ruchi Sarna-ji for explaining the importance of communication with the management, because if any audit proper communication is missing with the management, then it sometimes defeats the purpose of the audit itself. So the communication, effective communication, and the presentation of report. She explained both the aspects in a detailed and the practical manners. So what are the practical issues in the communication and the presentation of reports? She explained these things in a very detailed manner, so it will be helpful for the member. We would also like to thank Naval Chaudhary for organizing this session in a very detailed and effective manner. But not the least, we would like to thank all the audience of the seminar. We got around 2,000 audiences for this program. What details I am receiving from ISB, approximately 2,000 audiences are there in this program. So any program is successful not only because of the organizing committee members and the speakers, but also due to the participants as well. Because without the participants, no program is successful. So we would also like to thank the participants for this wonderful session, and we hope that we will get, all the members will get some insights of the internal audit, and they will be able to improve their quality of internal audit based on this program. And ISB will continue conducting such programs in the future as well. And we also at the Gurugram branch continuously doing various programs on the different topics. So I would also like to thank our committee members at the Gurugram branch for being part of this program. So with these concluding remarks, and I think we should, these are my concluding remarks for this session, and over to you, Navalji, for conclusion of session.
Thank you, Nishantji, for your concluding remarks. And thank you, Ruchi ma'am, Nita ma'am, and Nitinji, and all the participants who are the part of today's session. And hope they all we have benefited the wonderful presentation on the documentation, as well as on communication and the reporting results of the internal audit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.